This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment being held on Wednesday, March 27, 2019, at 7:30 PM in the Municipal Complex. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this regular meeting has provided by prominently displaying the schedule of the regular meetings on the official notice board in the Municipal Complex, and by transmitting a copy of this schedule to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, Trenton Times, the Trentonian, and to Comcast Cable of New Jersey. A copy was also filed with the Clerk of Princeton. Do you want to call the roll?
Mr. Cohen? Mr. Cohen?
You can call them here. Yeah.
Ms. Coulson? Here. Mr. Davich? Mr. Floyd?
Here.
Mr. Shriver? Here. Mr. Tenenbaum? Mr. Valvanis? Ms. Chen?
Here.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Here.
Mr. Sine? Thank you.
Okay. All right, we want to go through the minutes of 14 November 2018. Does anyone have any comments on these? Somebody want to make a motion?
I move approval. Second.
Okay.
Ms. Coulson? Yes. Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, resolutions. Okay, the first one is Valley Road, Block 7001, Lot 26, in the R6 district of the township.
I move to accept.
Okay. You have a second?
Second.
Second? Okay,
Second.
we have a second.
I can't. I was an alternate.
Oh, I'll second it.
Okay. Claudia?
I did.
Ms. Chen? We're voting on the resolution.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. 7 Madison Street, Block 28.03, Lot 48 and 84 in the R4 district. Somebody like to make a motion?
I move to accept.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Okay.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Coulson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll start the applications. 394 Ridgeview Road, Block 2201, Lot 22, in the RA district.
Mr. Chairman, we have a letter from the applicant's attorney for Ridgeview Road asking that the application be again carried for a month. It's my understanding they're continuing with their efforts to reach an accommodation with the neighbors.
Okay.
So It would then be carried to, what's the April? April 22nd. So we're announcing it tonight, so the applicant will not need to renotice. If anyone's interested, it's April 22nd.
So if there's anyone here that wanted to speak on 394 Ridgeview, we're not going to be hearing that this evening. That's been carried. 394 Ridgeview is going to be carried to the next meeting.
Manager tells me it's April 24. All right, so it's being carried to April 24.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Okay, so our next case, 415 Franklin Avenue, Block 7310, Lot 14 in the R7 district.
Costa from the law firm of Stevens and Lee. I represent the applicant, Oreed Kendall. Ms. Kendall owns the property at 415 Franklin Avenue, Block 7310, Lot 14 in the R7 zone, and she's seeking to move her garage and to install a pool in her backyard. And I just want to double check, the notice was provided, I have the original
Yes,
copies.
Mr. Costa, the board took jurisdiction of the application last month, and it was carried. Yes, just for the record, the board took jurisdiction last month. It was carried to tonight's meeting. We'll swear you in for the evening. Mr. Bridger, do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
you.
Let's just go through the memo real quick. Not to repeat what Chris is saying, but Oreed Kendall's the owner of 415 Franklin Avenue, seeking a floor area variance and a C1 and C2 variances for a combined side yard setbacks to permit a garage relocation and the construction of a new in-ground pool. Setback variance is required for the relocation of the required second parking space in front of the relocated garage. Subject properties in the R7 zone and is subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with sections 10B, 253, 255, and 246 of the former Princeton Township Land Use Ordinance. Existing single-family use is permitted as of right. The subject lot is not complying with respect to the required 10,890 square foot lot area, whereas the existing lot is 9,021 square feet. It's non-complying with respect to the required smaller or side yard variance, setback, requirement's 10 and the existing is 7.2, and it's non-complying with respect to the required combined side yard setback requirement of 25, the existing 16.7. And the applicant is proposing to relocate the existing garage from the rear yard to the side yard. It'll be attached to the house, and this will provide space in the backyard for an in-ground pool. The garage will be attached to the house by a small 36 square foot addition, which increases the existing degree of noncompliance regarding the floor area ratio. The subject property has a maximum floor area ratio, which is proportional because it's a slightly undersized lot, of 29.3. The existing FAR is 32%, and the proposal will be 32.8. This is a D variance. The applicant should address whether, how the addition of the garage affects the site, whether the site can accommodate the additional FAR. It requires 5 affirmative votes. There are some other variances related to the relocation of the garage. The required side yard setback is 10. The proposed setback will be 2 feet. And then the required combined yard setback is 25, and the proposal will be 9.2. And then there's a slight variance for the parking. The existing parking is a complying layout, which provides 1 space in the garage and one space in front of it. When they move the garage to the front of the house, it doesn't comply with the setback requirement. The side yard setback requirement is 10 feet, and the proposal is 4.61. And the swimming pool itself has a variance for The side yard setback requirement's 10, and it's 7.6 feet to the right side. This is the decking around the pool, and the combined side yard requirement, again, is 25, and the proposed is 21.3 feet. And they've requested both C1 and C2 consideration on the C1 and C2 criteria. That's a brief synopsis of the case. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Taking that information from a broader sense, my client purchased this property in 2013 after a developer had substantially renovated the house. At that time, the garage was placed in the backyard in a location that was not very functional for the use of the house. It probably should have been placed where we're proposing to place it from the beginning, but if the developer had done that, he would have had to get a variance in order to do so. So my client is basically left seeking the variance to make her garage more functional, and she's also seeking to put a pool in her backyard. And we'll have our planner and our engineer will discuss the variances. Most of the variances are related to the fact that the lot is narrow and it's slightly undersized. However, I think it's important to note that we're actually reducing a lot of the impervious coverage. We're replacing it with a pool, but overall the impervious coverage is slightly lower, so we're not adding more to the lot. We ended up with the FAR variance that developed in the course of the application as we were looking at the figures of calculating the FAR. So we're slightly over. We did everything we could to get rid of that 39 feet that is our problem, unfortunately, but we were not able to do so because we're moving an existing garage, so we weren't able to build a new garage to remove that excess amount. So we feel the FAR variance is de minimis. We hope we'll be able to show that to the board this evening. This evening we have four witnesses available, and we'll see how the board, how many questions the board has. We may not introduce all those witnesses, but we have our engineer, Carmela Roberts, and Ted Pivovarnik from Roberts Engineering Group. Our client, the owner, Orit Kendall, is also available for questions. Paul Buda from Paul Buda Architecture, LLC, is our architect, and our planner is James Kyle from Kyle and McManus Associates. And I'd like to swear in the witnesses, if we can, all at once.
Do we have one extra witness?
We do. I view Carmela and Ted as a team.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful? I do. Thank you.
Our first witness is Carmela Roberts, and we do have the plans shown on the projector, which hopefully are projecting on your screens as well. Carmela, while you're getting settled, if you could give us the benefit of your background and your experience before boards for the purpose of qualifying you as an expert.
Sure. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Massachusetts.
Hard to hear you.
It's not on. If there's no... Yes? Better? Okay. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Massachusetts. I've been licensed as a professional engineer since 1989. I opened my own firm in 2004, so I've been in business for myself for 15 years now. I represent municipalities around the state, and I've been testifying in front of boards since 1991, so hundreds of meetings since then.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'd like to just describe for the board the existing conditions and then the proposed conditions. Our property, 415 Franklin Avenue, is 9,021 square feet in the R7 zone, which requires 10,890 feet. This is also known as Lot 14, Block 73010. The property gradually slopes from Franklin Avenue to the rear. The impervious surfaces on the site are a combination of the house and garage, an asphalt drive, a deck behind the house, and there's a small sidewalk that goes to the street. There is a gate across the driveway that's near the house, and the owner currently parks the car in front of that gate near the property within the 10-foot side yard parking setback. Right. There's a dry well in the rear of the property that picks up the impervious runoff, and part of what is drained to that is a small slot drain that's in front of the garage. It also collects water from the driveway. So total existing impervious surface on the site is 4,424 square feet, or 49.04%. The maximum impervious coverage in the zone is 49.50%. So there are several existing variances on the site. So lot area, as mentioned earlier, existing 9,021 square feet, 10,890 square feet required. The rear yard is currently at 14.3 feet, whereas 15 feet is required. Side yards are 7.2 feet and 9.5 feet, where 10 feet is required. And the combined side yard requires 25 feet, and there's 16.7. The FAR is 32%. However, there's a proportional FAR of 29.25%, which was calculated by the architect, who could explain that further for you. Right. In the proposed condition, the overall drainage pattern remains the same. The property slopes gradually to the rear.
You want to go to the next slide?
Oops.
Mr. Costa, did you want to make these exhibits?
Yes, let's, can we mark slide 1 of 8 as, do you want to mark the whole thing as an exhibit? Let's mark the whole slideshow as an exhibit, yes.
Okay. All right, so here we have the proposed
And let me
condition.
just get the background. These plans are the same as were most recently submitted, except they're colorized at this point for ease of viewing.
Right. So the rust color on that plan is the house, and now it is the garage, which has been moved up next to the house. Behind the relocated garage is a hatched area in green. That is the pavement that used to be around the garage and the garage area. That existing impervious cover will be removed, the area that's shaded. The landscaping does not change, with the exception of we'll be adding some arborvitae next to the side of the garage. The deck remains as is, and you can see there's a pool proposed in the rear. The existing dry well has to move slightly to closer to the sideline. Same size dry well will do, and receive the same amount of water that it does today.
And the dry well is the circle shown in the back left of the diagram, and it was previously in the center, correct?
Correct, correct. And the impervious surface on the site is reduced by 44 square feet. So the maximum impervious cover has been reduced from 49.04% to 48.55%. The reduction is mainly due to the reduction of the asphalt driveway. So in the proposed condition, the variances that are being requested, the lot area remains the same. The rear yard variance, which is no longer required, that has been eliminated. The side yard variance is, however, have changed from 7.2 and 9.5 feet to 7.2 and 2.0 feet. The combined side yard has been reduced from 16.7 feet to 9.2, where 25 feet is required. FAR is increased, 32.8%, and the architect will explain the proportional FAR. A side yard parking variance is required, 10 feet is required, we have 4.6. And lastly, there's the side yard variance on the pool of 7.6 feet.
And the I want to just go through a couple of these variances with you. The 7.6 feet for the pool matches the setback for the house correctly on the same side?
That is right. Our intention was not to increase the degree of side yard setback on that side.
Okay. And the rear yard setback has been eliminated by the movement of the garage next to the house, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I guess the variance that's been most exacerbated is the side yard on the garage side, which is because of the placement of the garage next to the house.
Next to the house, that's exactly right.
Okay. And the parking variance that exists is because, I guess, the spot shown in front of the garage is what creates the parking variance? Is that
That
correct?
is what creates
Okay.
the parking variance.
And
That's right.
the gate, which I think you can see kind of in the middle of the garage still,
Right.
is where Orit Kendall currently parks in front of that gate, correct?
That is what she tells us. That's right. She parks in front of the gate. She rarely uses the garage.
Okay, so the parking variance for the spot in front of the garage is really basically where she's parking already.
That's
correct?
right. That's where she's parking today.
I have no further questions for Ms. Roberts.
How are you going to build this? In order to build the pool, you have to move the garage. I can't hear you. All right, you hear me now? Yes. Okay. All right, in order to build the pool, you have to move the garage. Because the garage is in the way of the pool, you've got to grade it and excavate it. The garage, the driveway provides your, let's say, major access to the backyard. The other side has a single gate, and the access to that side of the house is very limited. So it's going to be, in my opinion, problematic to build this, and then from an ongoing basis, just getting into the backyard with any equipment is going to be difficult. So,
Allow me to answer. There are a number of tight houses like this in some of the older towns in the county. And in some locations, I've seen a contractor literally have to wheelbarrow things in and essentially have no heavy equipment to work with. But in this case, there is some existing room on the side of the garage where equipment could be moved in. I think for a while, there's no parking on that driveway. That's the only access to anything. But I do believe you could probably pull a backhoe in right next to the garage. If there's a fence that could come down, and that gives us about a foot to a foot and a half to the property line, a little more room. If it's completely a problem, there might be the opportunity to ask the neighbor if they wouldn't mind a little movement there. But if you can't rely on the neighbor, I think a pool company could get enough in there by hand and a few smaller pieces of heavy equipment to do most of what they need back there. And then that would allow the garage to be moved. And as I understand, the garage is being moved rather than being demolished and trashed and landfilled and rebuilt in an effort to try to make this whole endeavor of a more sustainable style, right? Worst case is the garage comes down, but I know that's not what the client wants. The best case is there's a contractor that's probably going to need to work closely with the owner to get the people and the equipment in that they need.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Anything else?
Our next witness is our architect, if there's any other
Okay.
questions related to that. Okay,
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
you've got a good mic. Paul, if you could give us the benefit of your professional background and appearances before other boards.
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Architecture from Temple University, 1986. I have a graduate degree from University of Pennsylvania, 1996. I have worked for firms in Princeton, and I've been on my own for about 7 years, my own firm. And I've also served as on the Planning and Zoning Board in Hopewell Borough for 10 years, so I appreciate what it's like to be on that side of the dais as well.
I think we can assume that you're qualified.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Okay.
I think you just push the arrow button.
Good. Okay. So the cover sheet, you're seeing the same set of plans, except they've been colorized here for better viewing. And I think it's helpful to see the front of the house, the three-quarter view, as well as the driveway, the side, and of course the stranded garage in the back. And what I'd like to do. Okay. Is take you through the plan and why we're proposing this garage location where we are. It ties into the existing mudroom that's in the back of the house, as you can see in your plan, and also it respects what traditionally is the location of a garage to a house, which is usually about 24, 25 feet from the front of the house. This house was reconstructed, as Chris mentioned earlier, and when it was reconstructed with an addition to its rear. So its location is actually proper to a traditional house. The other thing I'd like to add is, in terms of the elevation, is that we're shifting the garage, yes, but we can't just shove it against the house. It wouldn't be proper in terms of the drainage, in terms of how a gable roof would be next to a two-story house. So we have this small connector. And that small connector is about 1 foot 10 inches in depth. And that's what is causing the overage in the floor area ratio. And Carmela mentioned earlier about the proportional. I followed what's in your code in terms of, because it's an undersized lot, and I think, Derek, you can confirm that that's how we get the 32.8%.
And the prior FAR was 32, correct? So it's a 0.8 increase?
Correct.
That has triggered the D variance.
So I'd like to go back actually to the previous slide. What is interesting also about this location of the garage is it helps the view shed from our client's perspective, but it also helps the view shed from the neighbor's perspective. What you're not seeing on this drawing, and I don't know if we can go to the aerial, and if last slide. Ah, perfect. Okay, if you look to the right of our property, that neighbor has a elongated deck, and by moving that garage from the stranded location, as it's kind of almost like an island in the backyard, to the location we're proposing, it helps with their view shed as well. It also gives privacy where it's located for both neighbors. This garage would be in front of one window. There's a one-story shed off of the back of the neighbor's house, and that would create privacy for both neighbors.
And currently, if we look at Ms. Kendall's window, I guess the part of her house that has a 14 on it in this last slide, that is her kitchen window, correct? So she would be looking directly into the window of the neighbor's house.
Correct.
Without this garage, correct?
That is correct.
So the garage provides privacy at an area where they would desire privacy?
Correct.
Okay. And would also open up the backyard view?
Correct.
Okay.
Also, that gap provides stairs because, of course, the garage is lower than the house, and we need to be able to connect the two. It also provides a place to get out of the car when you're parked in the driveway. The height of the garage is about 8 foot. Currently, the fences are at 6 foot. So the difference isn't that much in terms of that window for the neighbor's house. As was mentioned before, we'd be planting arborvitae there as well. And I can also add that the neighbor has a condenser on that side of the property. So in some ways, this garage is shielding neighbors from each other in terms of it's helping with the privacy, it's helping hide the condenser, it's opening up the view shed. So we see a lot of benefits. Is there anything else I can add here? I think
there
that
any
sums it up. If you have any questions.
Questions? Any board members have questions, please?
Yeah, just from the pictures, is this garage used primarily for an actual use by a car, or is it storage, as many garages are?
The goal would be to use it for the car. Currently, it is not because it's just so difficult, opening up the gates and getting back there. So the goal is to use it as a garage, so this way one could then access the house directly.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Is there a need to have any concern about light blockage as a result of how close? Where there's an increase in privacy, there might also be a decrease in light. So it's hard for me to tell exactly, but I'm wondering what you could say about that.
Well, it would, like I said, it would be about a 2-foot differential to what is there now in terms of the fence. So the fence would come down, the 6-foot fence, and you would have an 8-foot side wall of the garage. However, that's stepped back from where the fence is. So, in other words, that's 2 foot back from where the fence is. So I don't think you're really losing that much light for that one window.
The fence is going to be replaced, right?
Well, the fence was shown next to the garage, and we've had some discussion about that doesn't really, the more we looked at it, why not end the fence at the end of the garage, at the back of the garage, and just have the arborvitae in between? It'd be too narrow.
I mean, is this your client's call, or is it, whose fence is it?
The
client.
fence would not be there. It would be replaced by arborvitae. And there actually is currently arborvitae there on both sides. Both neighbors have planted arborvitae on their respective sides. So the garage, in effect, would act as the fence.
Correct.
So the garage is going to be higher, so there will be some
Potential
light
diminution
issue.
in light. It'll be
Yeah.
2 feet further
And
away,
closer.
but a little higher.
Further away, right,
Right.
further away and 2 foot higher.
So there may be a small diminution, but I don't think it would, I guess, Paul, it's your expertise.
Right, I don't see it as an issue.
When you look down the driveway from the street, it appears to me that placing the garage there is going to be a very crowded view. You're going to have the garage, which obviously will be connected to the house with this 1-foot connector. Whether you have the fence there or not, then immediately on the other side of the fence, you have a big air conditioning condenser, the neighbors, and then the neighbor's house. But it appears to me that when you look down the driveway, that's going to appear very crowded. I mean, it's basically pulling the house to the edge of the lot, which visually, I think, crowds the view as you look down the driveway. And again, I have the other concern about just access to the garage, to the backyard.
Well, let me address 2 of those issues. I mean, the condenser is your usual air conditioner condenser, right, 3.5 foot high next to the house. So it's actually a low, you don't really even see it with the arborvitae that the neighbor planted right now. In terms of the access to the backyard, our client is fine with having access on the other side of the property, on the 7-foot
Okay.
side.
Okay. I mean,
So,
that's-
yeah, I
Anybody
think our
else?
planner will address other buildings and garage location, garage to house location.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess in the point that you found in your study that there were some similar placements of the garage in the neighborhood, is
I
that
did.
correct?
I did. I took a walk through the neighborhood and we took photographs and that's where that condition of the traditional 24-foot back from the front of the house to garage location came from.
But I think, well, tell me, when you walked through and saw other houses with the garage or lean-to type construction next to the house, the side yard setback between those structures and the property line were greater than what you're proposing. Did
No.
you agree? Okay, I'll wait for your testimony.
We wait for the
You looked-
planner, yeah.
I walked it, and a number of them are, you're less setback.
Okay, I mean, in particular, at 370, on the drawings, 377 and 381. So you see the circle, you see the subject property to the left in the aerial view with the rectangle, and then if we travel about 7 houses, I think, to the right. And they happen to be next to each other, which was really quite interesting.
Yeah,
Both-
there's also structures on the other side of the street, too. You're not mentioning those.
I was just mentioning that's the one we found that had this issue of
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
a garage next to
But
a house close to the
If you
front.
looked across the street, there's also structures
Absolutely,
in that block that do have a lot more setback.
correct,
You're just not mentioning that
correct.
or counting it.
Well, I think, one of the realities that we're dealing with, and I just drove down the street this evening, so I know exactly what the houses you're referring to. We have a narrow lot, and so we're trying to make our garage functional and connected, and that's the variance that we're seeking. So there are, I guess what we're trying to show is there are other examples that are similar to this, and there are also examples where there is plenty of room on the side. So we do understand that.
And you mentioned, if I may ask, you mentioned again, you have a narrow lot.
Yes.
Correct.
What's the zoning requirement for width?
I believe it was 60, and we're at
And
53.
how wide is your lot?
I think
I
it's,
just have to pull this up, I'm sorry.
It's 60, right? You don't, Your lot's 60, the zoning requires 60, you don't have a narrow lot.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. It was a square footage that was,
Right.
that was the issue. Correct.
I'm just trying to get a balanced presentation.
Yeah, no, you're correct. It's the square footage that we're under, not the,
I think we're working with the current placement of the house and the width of the house and trying to put a garage next to it. And that's really, that's why
Yeah.
we're seeking the side variance.
And you're working with the fact that the developer didn't want to go for this variance, so he built a wider house and put the garage in the back.
I don't know that, but that's happened before, so I don't,
I don't
dispute
say
it.
that, but you tell me, you're working with a wide house.
Right. Any other questions for this witness?
No, you can move on.
Our
Thank
next
you.
witness is James Kyle, who is our planner. I believe Mr. Kyle has appeared before this board on
I think he has.
numerous
yes.
occasions, so
Yes. So
if we can ask him,
I would
we
think
can
it's-
qualify him as an expert?
I would think we can.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was retained by the applicant to review the planning issues associated with this application. As part of that, as I do with any case that I work on, I've been to the site a number of times, talked with the applicant and the team about, different approaches. We've talked about different issues that were raised as a result of the memos. I've reviewed the zoning ordinance and the master plan, and also prepared exhibits. Also took a good look at a lot of the houses in the neighborhood as well to kind of see if there were precedents and, what the issues are that impact these lots. I think we've gone through most of the existing conditions. Both Derek and Carmela touched on the existing non-conforming conditions and the variances that are required. I think what I want to do is just first address the FAR variance, because that's kind of the big D variance that's required. It's a D4 variance. As we've indicated, this really comes about as a result of the fact that we are attaching the garage to the house and adding this roughly 39 square feet between the garage, which will be relocated, and attaching it to the house. So that's what creates the issue. And we've, in town, we've kind of gone back and forth. Garage counts, garage doesn't count. So now we're in a position where the neighborhood standards that were recently adopted that are not applicable to this application, because this application was deemed complete prior to their adoption. The current neighborhood standards allow an exemption for a garage up to 300 square feet if it is behind the rear wall of the dwelling. So the current position of the garage, if it will pop up here. So the current position of the garage in the rear yard would exempt it from being included in FAR, but again, the fact that we're moving it up and attaching it to the house is what creates the issue here. And in this application, while there are some benefits that we'll talk about, is really about making this garage functional. The current position at the rear yard, it doesn't provide any cover. If you're coming home in the rain or in the snow and you're trying to get the groceries out, and our client doesn't really even utilize it for anything other than storage. So the other thing is, if you look at the neighborhood, there are very few detached garages in this neighborhood. There might be 2 or 3 in this block that we're within. So from a functional perspective, the current location doesn't really provide any functional use for the property owner. So in terms of the D4 variance, I think that there are purposes in the municipal land use law that would be promoted by the grant of the variance here. So rather than take this from a functional perspective, I want to give the board some purposes of zoning that I think would be promoted. The first would be purpose A, to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. Also purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment. And then purpose J is the conservation of the environment and historic districts and sites. Less that, though, the main thrust in that purpose is really the preservation of the environment. Now, what we can achieve by relocating the garage to the position that's proposed is, as you can see from the crosshatch area that Carmela mentioned during her testimony, that's all asphalt driveway that's going to be removed as a result of this. Yes, we are replacing it with a pool and a pool deck, but in my mind and the project team's mind, there's a big difference in those two impervious surfaces. So driveway, you have cars that park on it, fluids that leak, rains, takes that oil and fluids and gets it into the ground or off onto the grass. We're replacing a lot of that impervious with clean surfaces. So the garage roof, and the DEP considers garage roof runoff to be completely clean. And then the pool deck will obviously not have vehicles or any automobiles that are parked on it. So any runoff that comes from those surfaces will be cleaner water. So yes, there's about the net decrease is only about 44 square feet, but I think there's a tremendous benefit here in that we're recuperating some green space and then adding areas where we'll have clean runoff as opposed to what we'll call dirty runoff from potential vehicles. So it also gets that car into the garage where there's less of a chance that you would have a situation that we have now, which is that the car's parked on the driveway. If you have an oil leak or some kind of fluid leak, it's going to go right onto the driveway and then be carried into the stormwater management system here, the dry well. So I think there's some benefit there. Paul also talked about the fact that the view shed from the neighbor's lot will be improved with the relocation of the garage. Let me just go to the aerial photograph. So right where this is neighboring lot 15 directly to our east, right where the 15 is in this exhibit is where their deck is. So that deck currently, with the way that the topography falls off to the south, so from Franklin to the south, that garage is located in a position where that deck looks directly over the roof of that garage. So by eliminating the garage, or rather relocating it forward to be in a position roughly even with about the first third of their deck, it greatly improves the view from their outdoor space at the rear yard there. So we'll be replacing that garage with green area that improves that view shed. So I think that's a benefit as well. As Paul also mentioned, this does provide some additional privacy. Right now, if you see the photos in the architectural set, so the bottom left-hand, the east view is the subject property. You can see those windows along the side of the house there. And then if you look at the top right view, P3, you can see that there are also windows on the adjacent house that kind of look at each other. So while these lots conform to the zoning at 60 feet in width, these houses are in pretty close proximity to one another. And there are situations in discussing with the client where, you know, if the neighbor's in that room downstairs and she happens to be having people over at her house, they're basically looking at each other through those windows. So it's a situation that we can alleviate to a certain degree by moving that garage up and providing some additional privacy between these lots. This also provides a little bit more usable rear yard area here. So along the front of the dwelling, along Franklin Avenue, there's fairly limited space for activity, and generally that's, you know, there's an interaction there, there's a porch, there's, you know, that public-private interaction, but here we're actually going to be able to create some more usable green space in the backyard where a lot of kind of the private homeowner activity occurs as opposed to being out in the front yard. So I think that this also provides that in addition to the view shed improvements for the neighbor as well. So I think overall there are benefits to this that would satisfy the positive criteria. The site continues to be suitable despite the increase in the floor area that we're requesting. As we've said, we're not really constructing anything other than an additional roughly 39 square feet in order to make a connection between the garage and the house. And essentially this is not going to be living area. It's something that needs to be put in, as Paul said, because we need an area to get a step up into the house while there's a car parked there. So we really need that extra 1 foot, I think it's 9 or 10 inches in order to achieve that. So the increase in floor area here is nominal. It's not living space, so it doesn't really result in any significant increase over what's permitted. So I think that in terms of the impact or the potential impact of the floor area increase on the neighboring properties, I don't suspect that it will be substantial based on the nature of the additional floor area that we're installing or proposing to install. Again, it's really more utilitarian space to allow extra room for a car door to swing and then to get that step up into the house given the grade difference between the finished first floors. So I think overall there's no potential that this could have a substantial impact with this increase on any of the neighboring properties. In terms of the intent and purpose of the zone plan and reconciling the governing body's institution of this requirement, obviously the intent of the floor area ratio standard is to control the amount of structure and also the mass of the structure on the lot. And I think that given the relatively minor nature of what we're proposing to increase that by, that there's no potential substantial impact to that standard, nor is it difficult to reconcile given the fact that, again, we're not adding additional living space. It's more utilitarian at that point. So I think overall, we can meet the standard for the D4 variance. Now, in terms of the bulk variances, I think these really qualify as more a C2. And to Mr. Floyd's point, this lot is much like most of the other lots in the neighborhood. It's 60 feet wide. Some of these might be a little bit closer to meeting that 10,890, but we're about 1,800 square feet short of that. But overall, I think the analysis here would probably be more fitting as a C2, where purposes of zoning are promoted and the benefits outweigh the detriments. So I think a lot of the purposes that we talked about with the floor area ratio variance are really the positive benefits from the granting of the variance in this case. And again, as we talked about, it's a reduction of those asphalt surfaces, replacing what we'll consider to be dirty impervious surfaces with clean ones, and then providing some visual benefit to the neighbor as well. As far as the impact to surrounding properties from the grant of the variances, let's first talk about the side yard setback for the garage. Just want to go to the... So as you can see in P3, the neighboring property has installed arborvitae along the property line. There's kind of a double row there. The other part of this is that this garage, as Paul said, is not going to be very tall. So if you look at, and to Mr. Cohen's point about the mass and kind of extending the width of this structure, you can see on the front north elevation here on sheet A2 that this is a single-story structure. It has a very shallow gable roof that will then be connected with a hip into the main structure. Comparing it to the fence that's there now, the 6-foot solid fence, we're really increasing the height by a few feet. It's not really extending the mass of the entire structure across the entire lot. So I think the effect that you'll get, and to Ms. Colson's point about the impact to light, air, and open space, we're really kind of replacing the fenced area with the garage. And I think that given that it's a one-story part of the structure, that it doesn't have a significant impact on the view from the street. The other thing is it's pushed back fairly far. So the new neighborhood standards that were adopted at the end of last year actually permit an attached garage on a lot that's 60 foot in width or less to be 5 feet from the property line. So if you look at the neighborhood standards, when this was reviewed at the planning board level, they see a lot of these issues with these narrower lots, and they wanted to provide some flexibility in terms of locating garages here. And then when those neighborhood standards were implemented, you can attach a garage to a house, but they didn't want it to be even with the front facade of the house, and the requirement is that it be pushed back 16 feet from that front facade. So if you recall, Paul said that we're about 24, 25 feet from that front wall. So we're really kind of meeting the intent of the neighborhood standards, although they're, again, not applicable to this application because they were implemented after we were deemed complete. But if you look at that, by those standards, we would be allowed to locate this garage within 5 feet of the side property line. Now, the requirement there is that you have arborvitae or some kind of evergreen screening that goes along that wall to provide some protection from the neighbors. So I think overall, the reduction that we're seeking is fairly consistent with the neighborhood standards and the intent that, we have to recognize that some of these narrower lots of 60 feet or less in width are going to have some practical difficulties with issues like this. So I think in terms of the impact to the neighboring property, we're going to provide the screening that's required. It's really a reduction of about 3 feet from the 5 that would otherwise be permitted, given the new ordinance standards. So I think we can successfully mitigate any of the potential impact of that and provide the screening that's required. And I think given the one-story height of the structure, it won't have a substantial impact and actually will provide some benefit in terms of increased privacy and again, the improvement of the view shed. The pool deck setbacks, in terms of the impact of those on the neighboring properties, as was testified to, we've held the 7'6" on the west side here, and so the 7'6" is on this side, the west side of the property. So we've maintained at least a setback that's consistent there. The pool deck is a structure that's at ground level, so it's not as though this is a building structure that would have height and mass that would tend to have an impact on the neighboring property. The 6-foot fence, solid fence that goes around the entire property at the rear, I think will address most of the potential impact from that reduced setback of the pool deck. Again, given that it's a ground level structure, I don't think there's really any potential that it will have a substantial impact on the neighboring properties. It's not located in a position where it's adjacent to a house or a structure, so I don't think there's any chance that that'll be substantial in nature. So really, that's kind of the potential impacts or to the, as a result of the side yard variances that are requested. I would say, in my estimation, looking at what we're doing in terms of landscaping and then the 6-foot solid fence that runs around the property, I don't think these rise really to the level of being substantial. In terms of the intent and purpose of the zone plan, there's nothing in the master plan that sets forth any justification for the setback requirements that are implemented in this zone, but it's generally, as Ms. Colson pointed out, it's a light, air, and open space issue why we really have these setbacks. So the thing that I would point out is that the garage is a structure that is limited in depth. We're not talking about an encroachment running the whole length of the lot, or an encroachment that is similar to that which would be for the main structure of about 40 or 50 feet. I think the depth of the garage is 20? 20? Yeah. So it's about 20 feet. The height of the garage is 8 feet. So it's a relatively limited encroachment into that required setback, again, that we can mitigate with the landscaping. And again, I think in terms of the intent of that, we are not substantially impacting the light, air, and open space that would be available to the neighboring lot. I don't think this will cause any issues with, shadowing from sun and things like that. If this were a 2-story structure, the garage was longer, there might be some concern over that, but I think overall we can successfully mitigate any of that potential impact over this limited area to the point that it won't have a substantial impairment of the intent of those setback standards. So I think in summary, I think that we can meet both the positive and negative for the D4 as well as all the setback requirements, variances, and I think that in this case, particularly with the setback variances, the benefits here outweigh the detriments, and that the variances would be justified in this case.
I had a question. Are you talking about the 2-foot strip you're going to landscape that between the garage and the adjoining property?
Yeah, so the proposal is to, so the plan currently shows the fence terminating in about the middle of the garage. I think probably the smarter choice there would be to move that fence to the rear and then provide that green.
I mean, just, how do you plant a tree in a 2-foot space? I'm just curious.
Well, it's there's 3 foot, because we provided it the distance of the overhang.
Okay.
But arborvitae can be trimmed and kept in a fairly narrow space, and I think the other thing is that there'll probably be some conversation with the neighbor at that point as well, to work cooperatively on a scheme that works. They would be planted on our property, but, might kind of spill over a little bit. But I think the intention is to talk to the neighbor about that and just make sure that it's not an issue. And it's really the garage wall that we're screening, and then the fence will take care of the rest. So basically from the garage, the point of the back of the garage all the way to the rear will be a 6-foot solid fence that exists today. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Where do you plan to locate the pool filter and pump equipment and heater, if any?
That I don't know.
That's an important decision, because they create noise and they do take up some space.
They do, and I would have to ask the client if she's had discussions with any contractors about the location, because I'm not aware of where that would be, but I guess if we have her.
Yeah, we can have her speak on that. I know the pool design is preliminary. It's put in, to establish a space, but I'm not sure that has been designed, and we'd be certainly happy to work with the the board professionals in terms of if there's a concern about mitigating the location of that. But we will have her speak to the board on that, and I wanted to introduce her on a few other issues as well, just to.
And I would say this, we have not requested any variances related to the location of that equipment, so it would have to go in a location that's conforming as far as the ordinance is concerned. And I would say that the wood fence that surrounds the rear of the property, will help, because the pool equipment is, much like an air conditioning condenser. It's not very tall. It might be, 2-3 feet. So we'll put it in a location where, we won't have any impact on the surrounding properties, and it'll be screened by the fencing in all likelihood.
Have you, or did you, when you, not necessarily you only, but the architect yourself, did you consider any other locations for this garage?
Well, the desire here was to attach it to the house in some fashion, because it's just not functional for Ms. Kendall at this point. I mean, the desire is, and it really limits the potential location, but again, it was pushed as far back as possible based on the location of the existing mudroom. That seemed to be a logical attachment point, and then it allows a seamless entry into the house, and then a place to kind of, take off shoes and coats, and then before you go into the kitchen and the other spaces. So we did talk about it. I mean, we talked about a number of different options, trying to anticipate concerns and questions that the board might have, but they're really limited in terms of the existing space that's inside the house and the point that we had to connect the garage, and really, a desire to not push that garage too much farther up towards the street, in the spirit of trying to meet those neighborhood
Oh,
standards.
I don't think you can push it.
No,
further towards
right.
the
So
street,
it's,
right.
just based largely on the design of the house and the existing spaces inside.
The other issue is it helped us maximize removing as much pavement from the back as
No,
possible. So
I
that
can
was,
appreciate that.
the idea of moving it back was brought up, but that leaves us more pavement. So the fact that it tied into the mudroom, plus we were able to create that green space was a reason for its location.
I'm very concerned about what you're going to have left with this, between the arborvitae and the garage. There's going to be absolutely no space in there to pass by to get into the backyard.
Yeah, on that side, I think likely what will have to happen is the gate on the west side will have to be modified so that, someone can get a mower in there. I think
And the landscaping and everything else, but no, I understand that. It's just, I think visually, when you look at, if you look at the cover sheet of the drawings on photograph P3, which is pretty much a straight view down the driveway, and you look at the location of the neighbor's arborvitae, and what you're going to do in there, it's basically going to bring the overall size of the house right to the property line. And then looking at some of the aerial photographs of the neighborhood, you can clearly see that there is a reasonable amount of open space around other houses in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so I will say this, and to Mr. Floyd's point, I think if you look at, with few exceptions, most of the houses that are on the north side of Franklin Avenue are a little more modest. So you have a lot of capes, a lot of 1.5-story structures, not like the ones that are built on lot 14 and 15. And, again, you kind of get a hint of it here in this aerial photograph. You see on Levitt Lane, the house on lot 4 under construction. You see lot 21 on Erdman Avenue under construction. So a lot of these houses that exist are a little more modest. They don't push out to the setbacks as much as these houses that were constructed here were. So I think proportionally, and a lot of those houses have garages that were either converted into living space. So as you go down Franklin Avenue and look at a lot of these dwellings, you can see where the garage was, a lot of them don't have any garage. But a lot of the houses on the south side of Franklin, in particular 377 and 381, was an interesting thing. So I think on 381, that garage is attached in a manner very similar to what we're going to do, and I think that one is actually pretty close to the property line. I didn't measure it because I can't tell where the property line is, but I would say it's definitely within 5 feet. And then the neighbor on 381 has a detached garage, which is put, basically right next to that garage, probably within 8 or 10 feet of the property line. So there are similar situations in the neighborhood where this has occurred, and I think, from a practical perspective, there will have to be some adjustments in the post-construction condition as to how you access the rear yard. But I think in terms of the mass if you look at the structure at 381, that is a very large two-story house. It's basically a rectangular box, and then you kind of have this garage attached on the side. And I think, from my observation looking at that, the mass of the garage is greatly downplayed versus the mass of the overall structure. And I think the limited height and the way that we've designed this roof, and I think Paul was sensitive to that, trying to keep it shallow. We're not trying to create any living space above that garage. You can see here on the front north elevation that roof is shallow. We're talking, maybe a couple of feet from the top plate of the wall. So I think it'll, really tend to limit or, won't eliminate the impact, but it'll tend to limit it as viewed from the street, in my estimation, just looking at the mass of the structure versus the garage.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no more questions, I'll introduce Ms. Kendall.
Sure. Any other questions?
You said the height of the garage is 8 feet. Is that to the ridge of the roof? It's 8 feet?
Can you come up to the microphone?
Well, wait,
Wait,
you
should we,
wanna-
public comment period?
Well, why don't we wait until after the presentation, and then we'll hear from everybody.
Do you want Jay to introduce that? You want to introduce that? It's not a beautiful photo, but...
Yeah. So let me just, I don't have this in the presentation, but I think this is what we have is a printed photo of 381 and 377, and I think it shows kind of the relationship, and I think it does a good job of illustrating the kind of the mass of the single-story structure. And I would, when you look at this, you'll see that the roof that's proposed, that exists on this one at 381 is definitely a little taller, so I think it illustrates the point. And you can also see pretty clearly that the setback, there's a fence that runs along the driveways here. So if we could mark this, and
We'll mark this A2.
It's an aerial photo, correct?
it's a photo,
The
a
photo, did you
photograph.
take it?
No, Mr. Buddha did.
It's a street
Buddha.
photo,
Yeah, so
photos
this
from the
is-
street taken by Mr. Buddha. Which addresses are these?
So 377 and 381. 381 is on the left side, and 377 is on the right. So this shows the two garages that I just discussed that are kind of right next to each other on these lots.
Unless there's questions, I'll bring up Ms. Kendall.
We move on? Okay. Keep going.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. If you could tell the board how long you've lived in the property and why you'd like to move your garage.
Sure. So I moved into the property December of 2013, so 5.5 years.
Use the microphone. Get a little closer to it, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I moved in the property 5 years ago in December 2013, so it's 5.5 years that I've lived there. And before I bought the house, the builder who built it, I had asked him to move the garage. And he said, you know, we're really looking to sell it. He had investors. He had built a house next door too. And he said, you know, just get the house. It won't be a big deal to move it after you buy it. Shame on me, but I travel a lot for work and I have a really demanding life, as everyone does. And I just didn't think he wouldn't be transparent with me. So 2.5 years later, with my posse, with my architect, the surveyor, it takes a village. I want to move the garage because I want it attached to the house. I feel that it has no value, and it takes up half my backyard, which is small already. And my home is like my sanctuary, and I just don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the backyard, because when I'm in the backyard, I look at the garage, and when I get out of the car and I get wet, it's you know, it's not a hardship. It's just, it's not ideal. And had the builder been honest with me, I wouldn't have bought the house. But 5 years later, and I think you and I started talking, like, I first met with Mr. Bridger, and he really advised me that I needed help. And that's when I met Mr. Costa and the rest of the team to help me do this. And it's been a really long road to get here, and very, very, very expensive, which I can't hold the builder accountable. But the day that I met with Mr. Bridger, the builder happened to be in the zoning office trying to get another permit. And I said, oh, come with me. You said this will be easy. And he just walked out the door. So, you know, I think that attaching the garage to the house will be beneficial for me, not because I can't get wet. I've been getting wet for 5 years, and this is the first house I've owned. I've lived in condos and apartments before. And it would mean a lot to me. The reason that we're applying for the pool variance at the same time is just so I don't have to do this twice. The pool would be just, again, part of the sanctuary, and the reason that I would really enjoy where I live. But I'm also 7 months pregnant, and getting into the house with a baby, the way that the garage is, not that that's the reason I did it. I wasn't pregnant when I don't want to lie. Just getting into the house now, like, it's like a nightmare. Like, I slip on the ice, or I can't put my recycling. It looks disgusting on the driveway because we have to open up the gate, and the wood, you know, with the temperature shifts and it's breaking, and I have to replace it anyway, and it's only 5 years old, and it's so expensive. So, you know, that's why I want it, and I want to enjoy the backyard and not be looking at a garage. So that's why we're here, and I know you all have really important things to do, and this sounds so frivolous, but it's not. I just want to enjoy my house.
Any questions?
No? Anybody?
And one thing I wanted to add, Mrs. Coulson, so when I get the garage, or whoever asked about entry into the backyard, we were going to put a door in the back of the garage. So to make life easy for the landscapers, even though there'll be minimum grass to mow back there, they'll still have trees and all the stuff that we're going to add in. So we were just going to add doors in to the garage, the back of the garage.
A pass-through.
A pass-through, yes. So, and again, for the landscaper, I mean, again, I'll do a lot myself, but the stuff I can't do, there'll be ways for people to get in the backyard.
And have you gotten far enough with the pool idea to talk about where you're going to
Oh,
put the
yeah.
filter? Okay.
Yes, thank you. So we did. So my HVAC condenser is on the side with the, if you're facing the house, it's on the right side. If you're facing the street, it's on the left side. The right on the side of the deck is my condenser in the pool. They said that now the equipment, because it's going to be a small pool, they're going to do it free-forming to be compliant with whatever setback we agree to. So this is, as Chris said, it's just a preliminary iteration. They're going to put it right. Oh, okay. So I'm challenged with this stuff. So yeah, they're going to put it like near the condenser. They said because it's a small pool, the equipment won't be. I mean, it'll still be equipment, and right now there's trees around it because of the condenser, so it won't bother the neighbors. I have spoken to my neighbors about it because, to your point, you know, I don't want to make the neighborhood look worse. I'm looking to, you know, keep my property value up and make it go higher. Otherwise, I would have just taken down the garage, which I don't want to do because I don't want to lose that value. But So I spoke to my neighbors because this would be on their side, and they were fine with it. I don't think it's going to be cumbersome. I think they're going to be able to align it with the current condenser.
So you're talking about condenser, meaning the air conditioning?
Yes, yes. Is that the
And,
Yeah.
but I was talking about the filter and the pump.
Yes, there's
and
room in the
possibly-
corner to put everything there.
So
So
let me
that,
just-
so are you accounting for some kind of a concrete pad for that in what you've done right now in terms of impervious surface?
I don't
Because
know that I need
it
it.
would add something. I don't think you're going to just put that on the yard.
Well, so right now the condenser is there with access, clean access to it. Obviously, there's trees in front of it, but I don't know that I need
I don't know that it's on this plan, but we would make sure that,
it was compliant.
yeah, we would keep our impervious so it matched what's on the
I mean,
plan.
it's pretty close right now, so
Right.
just saying.
I mean, then I would reduce the pool deck. I'm not looking to
We'd have to reduce the pool
Yeah.
deck to address that. We haven't designed that concrete pad yet.
And I got the plan for the pool done when we were submitting everything together. So it's been, I'm sure, even 3 years later, technologies have improved, and I don't know what the compliance is for that, but I don't want anything to burn or anything, so.
I just noticed it wasn't there, so I.
Yeah, no, that's appreciated. And we would make that work probably by reducing the pool deck if we needed to. That would be the easiest place where
That
we
makes
could
sense.
reduce to make it so that it matched.
Chris, the other issue is, I think obviously you can either increase your stormwater capacity but it's a 15-foot setback, unfortunately, for the pool equipment. So that's the
Okay.
other challenge. I mean, just so you know, if
Right, so we would, again, we would address, we'd put it where it needed to be to match that setback.
Yeah, so when I spoke to the pool company, they had basically said it shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, they maybe didn't know. So I would definitely be compliant.
You have heard that before from people.
I'm very gullible.
No, but I mean, it's just something you need, we all need to be careful about. And
Yeah,
I'm trying
well-
to think of where it would go, like, would you put it under the deck or where that might
I mean, if I
work
was allowed to
in
put it under
terms
the
of
deck, but-
15 feet.
I mean, I have animals and a child, and I don't want anything to burn down or something, so I'm very cognizant of safety. That being said, when you spend $1 million on a house and the builder tells you you're not going to have a problem to move the garage, again, shame on me. But the pool, I didn't put a deposit down, though.
Yeah, I have a question about backyard access and to sort of drill down a bit on what you mentioned about there'll be doors in the back of the garage so that the landscaping people can get through. Would that actually be a full garage door so that if needed, somebody could actually drive a pickup truck back there?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Free.
Yeah. So, and also, there's 3 access points in the backyard from the back of the house. There's one from the mudroom, and then there's one from the living room, and then I have a sliding door in the living room. So again, for egress, I don't know if you're worried about that, but
Equipment, it was equipment.
Yeah, well, equipment, the garage, I love that idea. Hey, I'm due a free break. Thank you.
Anything else?
No? Go
Well,
ahead.
thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think there was a question from the public, if that's,
Well, are you done?
that is everything. That's all of our witnesses,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Anybody want to speak on this? One at a time, come up to the microphone, identify yourself.
Sorry, I'm moving a little slow. Back problems. My name is Ann Davis, and I'm sorry. I live directly across the street from Miss Kendall.
Ms. Davis, we just need to swear you in
Oh, I'm
case
sorry.
you give any testimony. If you swear from your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'm concerned because someone mentioned earlier that this house was reconstructed or added on. This house, when it was built prior to Miss Kendall moving in, it was a complete tear down. I've lived in the neighborhood my whole life. The builder that built her home never got any variances. So I'm confused as to why a homeowner has to get a variance. In the few blocks that driving over here, I notated 50 different homes that should have had variances. There was not a variance sent for any of them. But yet, every time a homeowner wants to change something, we're required to spend tens of thousands of dollars on legal fees and planning and everything else, and I just want to know why.
Well, I mean, in this particular case, the variance is driven by the fact that the homeowner wants to move the garage to the front of the house in the setback.
Well,
When the house was built and the garage was placed there, it didn't require a setback.
it did require, that house was torn down to the ground, and it was oversized for the lot, and I called the township at the time, and what I was told was, well, we're working on changing the laws. And I've spoken to more people than I care to count. And the latest response that I was given was, to quote it, well, we're currently changing the laws. I responded, so that means you do what you want and change the laws accordingly. And that my response was met with deafening silence. And I've yet to get an answer. That's my biggest concern, is that the house catty-corner to her across the street, the house is so overbuilt for the lot that it's literally, the garage is literally built just about on the property line. It's over the height requirements. Again, I never got one letter about a variance. And I don't understand it.
I'm not familiar with that, and I can't speak to that. I can tell you, though, that when people do come in to get building permits, the first action that's taken is reviewed by the zoning department. And the zoning department makes a determination if the house is, proposed house is compliant.
Well, I would like to see an audit of what variances have been applied for, who's paid for them, because this is not an even playing field at all.
Okay.
To address your concerns about Ms. Kendall's access to the backyard, my house is across the street and over one. And if you look at her aerial view, you can see I have no access to my backyard from my driveway. I have a 3-foot gate to get to my backyard. And I put a very large pool in. I cut the grass, I landscape. It's difficult, but if you want to do it, you'll do it. I mean, my walkway to get into my backyard, I think, is only about 2 feet wide. But, you know, as I said, I've made arrangements to have things built, and I've put a shed up. I built my own pool, decks and everything else. So access to the backyard, I don't think would be an issue for her. Another issue, just listening to all of this, there was a garage where she wants to put this. And I know you're not even aware of this. The house next door to her is the exact same house that was on her lot. They were just built backwards. So the house, if you're looking at her house, the house on the right, the garage is on the right side. Her old house, the garage was on the left side. And when they tore it down, they put the garage back in the corner. So there actually was a garage where she wants to put this. And again, I mean, my question is, I'm not understanding why homeowners have to jump through hoops to get things done. And builders just, you know, you turn around and they don't have to comply with the same laws that we do. And I'm not putting that on the zoning board. I'm not, because I know you all are, you know, you work very hard, and I'm not putting that on you. But there's something's amiss. I think that was all I had to, someone said something about a parking variance, and which I don't understand at all, because currently she parks in her driveway like we all do. I have a garage, mine is underneath my house. I think just about all the homes on Franklin have garages. I think that's about all I have to say. Again, my concern is the fact that we're even here. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? I think you had, did you want to speak earlier? Do you want to speak now?
They said that the garage was 8 feet.
You have to come forward. I can't hear you. And please identify yourself, and our attorney will swear you in.
Susan Simmons.
And Ms. Simmons, do you live on Franklin?
No.
No. Okay, you live in Princeton? I said, do you live in Princeton?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you swear or affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
I just had a question. I think it was stated that the garage was 8 feet tall, and I wondered, I didn't see that that could be the height of the roof ridge.
No, that's the wall, the side wall to the fascia board. So to get to the ridge, you could add another, let's say, 2.5 feet to that.
I think it's measured on, if
Yeah,
you can.
I'm going to try to get to the,
That's all.
There you go. It's
yeah.
number 1 on this.
What is that
10
dimension?
foot 3, I believe it says. Am I right on?
It's a little hard to read on the drawing.
Can I zoom into that?
It says 12.3 on the drawing.
12, okay, 12.3.
That was my only question.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, can you explain how the slope of the roof impacts the blocking of the light?
Yes.
Does anybody else like to speak?
If I just-
Can I have him answer that question?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so the pitch of the roof is actually needs to be taken into account. So that 12-foot 3, yes, is to the very top of the roof, but that's 6 feet away from what we're talking about.
It's
So
the
I just-
ridge.
Yes, I just
Yeah.
want to make that clear to the public.
Okay.
That's why we explain it the way we do.
Okay.
I'd also like to just add one thing about that garage, and to Mr. Cohen, your point earlier about the way it was looking from the street and the setback, that this garage is about 20 feet in length, but only 8 feet of that is adjacent to the neighbor's house. So the remaining 12 feet is adjacent to the deck, the neighbor's deck. So I think that just needs to be explained. I wish we would have put that on the site plan, so it would be better for you all to look at. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. No one else wants to speak? Okay. Do you have any closing statement?
I think I just wanted to review, as the board is aware, we're seeking the FAR D4 variance as one variance, and then we have the variances in relation to primarily the setbacks. Many of the setbacks are pre-existing, but we are seeking, just to review, we're seeking side yard variance of 2 feet on the one side where the garage is going to be placed, whereas 10 feet is required. The combined setback, side yard setback is 9.2 feet, where 25 is required. And we're seeking the side yard parking variance. As we've said, that's where Ms. Kendall currently parks her car, but it's 4.6 feet, whereas 10 feet is required. And we're also seeking the pool decking variance, side setback variance, which it lines up with the house as well. So those are the variants. That's a relief that we're seeking from this board this evening. And we'd ask that the D variance and the C variance have a separate vote after deliberation.
Okay. Okay. Do we want to go into executive session here and discuss this? Okay. Comments?
I think the FAR request is de minimis, 0.6%, so that's the D variance.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, the positive attributes too, as far as taking away impervious coverage and putting some green space in, making it, maybe nicer in the neighborhood. I mean, that's a positive. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I
I'm
couldn't
tired
hear you.
today. I said, taking away some of the impervious coverage, taking away that back driveway and putting in the grass part and pool, it's kind of more sustainable and a little nicer for the neighborhood. So I think that's a positive attribute.
Board members, I don't want to interrupt your discussion, but perhaps it might make more sense to consider the setbacks, which I guess are being offered as C2 variances for the garage, because if you don't want to approve the setbacks, the FAR for it
Goes away.
doesn't make much sense. So maybe you'd like to reverse the discussion, and it does make sense to have separate votes, but maybe it makes more sense if you're dealing with the garage first to talk about the setbacks and the parking setback.
Yeah, I think the FAR isn't such a big issue to me. It's more how crowded that west side, is it the west side? No, the left side of the
left
site
side,
is becoming. Talking about the amount left for planting. If you look at how the existing arborvitae is relative to the height of the fence, it's much higher, and then you'll have, it's almost going to be up to the overhang of the garage at the height it is now. And you're talking about introducing additional planting in that small area. It seems like a lot for that side of the site.
But on the other hand, the neighbor seems like they didn't object to that. And when you go down the street, I mean, Franklin's I think it's a very crowded street. They're all really like super narrow lots, and this is kind of consistent with what's happening in that neighborhood in terms of look. And there was there's no objection. No objection to, the arborvitae's there. I mean, if the neighbor didn't like it, I guess they would be here to testify. So it's an issue.
I think that does count for something. I think we also have to think about what's right in terms of the ordinances that we have and whether, the next neighbor might, we can't look to the neighbor as being the arbiter necessarily. I think it's somewhat persuasive that there aren't any objections from neighbors. But we still have to think about what the actual limitations are, or what we're agreeing to do if we do approve in the long run.
I think obviously the reduction in the paved area is a very nice idea. My concern, and it's a major concern, I think visually from the street, the garage where it's going to propose to be placed is going to really create a very crowded situation visually. I think it's going to create an awkward visual environment. Between the arborvitae, the house there, there'll be no access. I do have a real concern about access to the backyard. Again, in the future, it may not be an issue now, but it could be a problem. But I think the more importantly, I think that the garage placement creates a way too crowded visual environment. And I think there may be alternatives to placing it there, but and again, speaking to the neighborhood standards, which aren't in effect now, the neighborhood standards do talk about a 5-foot minimum, which there's a big difference between 2 and 5. So,
Steve, I would just counter that a little bit. I agree with what you say about the crowdedness, but I think because the garage is going to be placed back behind the front of the house, it diminishes that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's an alternative, but it's not an alternative that we have to look at.
No, I'm sorry. The way it is designed, you know, it doesn't come right up to the front of the house. It
I
is
see.
back, and I think that diminishes, I mean, I agree with your crowdedness idea, but I think that diminishes it a little bit because it's back.
It helps that it's
Yeah,
set back,
helps.
but it still doesn't minimize that very crowded situation on the left-hand side. Any other comments? Okay, I think no other comments. We're probably ready for a motion. Anybody like to make a motion?
Which one are you voting on? The parking garage setback?
I
and-
think that's the first
and
thing we
the
need.
setback variance?
Right.
Okay.
Move to approve.
I'm sorry?
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
To approve the setback.
The setback, okay. Do we have a second for that? Second. Okay.
I'm sorry, which setback approval are you doing?
The garage setback, I think we're talking about now.
From the side yard?
From the side yard. I
Okay.
believe that's what you're
Not the
talking about now,
parking
right? Yes,
front
side
yard setback?
From the side yard, yes,
Okay.
in this first one. Okay. Claudia?
Mr. Cohen?
No.
Ms. Colson?
No.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
No.
Ms. Perrin-Lambrose?
Yes.
So we got 1, 2. He's, no. I got 7.
I only missed 6.
Our new member.
Yeah, Mr. Stein.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
It's approved. You've got 4 yes votes, so.
Excuse me?
I said there's 4 yes votes, so it's approved.
Okay.
Oh, that's
just
that's only the garage setback. Now, you've got the parking setback
Okay.
for the parking in the,
So the
Side yard setback.
parking within the side yard is the
Yes.
second setback.
that's, yep.
Okay. So
I move
that'll
for
be our-
approval.
I'm sorry?
I move for approval.
Second?
Okay.
Mr. Cohen?
No.
Ms. Colson?
No.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Mr. Perrin-Lambrose?
Yes.
Ms. Stein? Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Approved.
And now we have the FAR variance,
Correct.
right? Okay.
Oh, wait, hold on. We've got, wait, we've got one more bulk variance.
For the side yard, for the.
You've got
pool.
the swimming pool variance for the side yard setbacks. And the other thing that Mr. Bridger's reminding me is that if there's a motion to approve, you'll also need to include in it that the pool filter and equipment must be located 15-foot setback, and that it needs to, they can't increase impervious coverage. They've represented a certain amount of coverage. If they exceed that, they're going to need another variance then.
Okay.
Okay.
Somebody want to make a motion on that?
I move approval of it with the conditions regarding the 15-foot pool,
Second?
setback of the equipment, and the impervious coverage is no more than what we're
Discussion
approving
in
now.
the FAR, sure. Second?
Second?
Okay.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Ms. Perrin Lambrose,
Yes.
Mr. Stein.
Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
Okay. And now the FAR. Okay. All right. So, the FAR variance.
I move approval of the variance for the FAR.
Second.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Colson,
Yes.
Mr. Floyd,
Yes.
Mr. Shriver,
Yes.
Ms. Chen,
Yes.
Ms. Perrin Lambrose,
Yes.
Mr. Stein.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you. It's approved.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sure. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Great road. Great road. It's on the agenda. Okay. Really gotta get with the Okay, have you looked at that? I think you have. No?
Swing it.
It's not a good thing. Litigate something. See if she has an extra copy.
You got it? Okay. So you're providing a project description? I will. Okay. Generally, and then I'll introduce you, if you could just take us through the site, and then just start on the, one slide there, and then we get to Brian. What do you want me to talk about in terms of the site? I said I really came prepared to talk about the DEP if necessary. Is that what you want me to bring up, or wait for them to have a question, or?
You need one?
Yeah, I know.
I thought you were in a wheelchair.
That was kind. Went through that, ruining my efforts to print things here.
Yeah. The neighbors didn't let me do this. Yeah. But, let me get yeah, yeah. You need to speak to Harlan about shelter.
His house is
And he comes in late. And Harlan, yeah, especially, he hasn't tell him he's not coming.
Okay, we got that one, okay.
No, that is not the one.
Okay.
There's another visual presentation, so if you want to move down, that guy's not here.
Okay.
Yes, you'll be able to see it better.
See if I can move this whole thing too. Yes.
Is 1107 Great Road, block 2001, lot 26, in the RA zone.
I just have to unwind this. That'll be fine.
Yes, the board took jurisdiction of the application last month and carried it to tonight's meeting. And you're under oath, Mr. Bridger.
Thanks. The Caliphs are the owners of 1107 Great Road. Property is in the RA zone. They are seeking a hardship C1 variance to permit the construction of a new single-family home on a non-conforming lot. The lot does not meet the required lot area. As I mentioned earlier, the subject's in the RA zone, and it's subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 10B 253, 255, and 246. That zone requires a lot area of 4 acres. The existing lot area is 3.47 acres. Applicant should advise the board where they have approached any of the adjoining lots to either purchase land or to sell the applicant's land to make their lot complying, or offer to sell the subject lot to it. The variances for lot area, the requirement's 4 acres, existing is 3.47. I note that property, is located within 300 feet of a within the 300-foot riparian zone, and the applicant should submit a letter from the Department of Environmental Protection certifying that the applicant qualifies as a permit by rule prior to the issuance of a zoning permit. They requested C1 consideration. That's just a brief synopsis of the case. Any questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Thank you. Chairman Cohen, my name is Ryan Kennedy. I'm an attorney also from Stevens and Lee, a different one, though, for this application. We're here tonight, as Mr. Bridger indicated, for a lot area variance. 3.5 has always existed here. It's a pre-existing nonconformity for this lot where 4 is required. You'll hear from our planner and possibly our environmental consultant about some of the issues that may concern the board, but certainly primarily from our planner. You'll hear from him that, yes, we did reach out and contact the neighbors to try to sell the property or purchase additional property. You'll hear that all of the other adjacent lots are either themselves not conforming or exactly conforming at 4 acres, so that even if someone had agreed to it, we could not purchase from them without making that lot more non-conforming than it is already. I think you're going to hear 2 other things. The idea of this application is the construction of a home for this family, and the net removal, a net decrease of impervious coverage, and a general trend and backing up off of the environmentally sensitive areas that are behind the property. So in doing that, you'll see, and actually let me ask the board attorney, we have a slide deck with exactly 4 slides. I'd like if we can mark it as an exhibit, if that's all right. All right, they are numbered, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And to my left, your right, we've got our 2 witnesses, or possibly just 1.5, our planner, environmental consultant, if we could have them sworn in.
Could they state their names, please?
Brian Leff, L-E-F-F. Peter Richards, R-I-T-C-H-I-N-G-S.
And gentlemen, if you raise your right hand, you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So in addition to the lot area variance, or kind of as part of that, 2 things have happened with the application since we would have been here last month. Thing one that has happened is that there was a request from, I believe, a neighbor that has now come by way of staff and perhaps even a committee that might be meeting in this building as we speak to come down here to speak to this. But there is an idea that the property owner allow for a future expansion of the bike path on Great Road to include this property. Now, we understand that to be quite a long down the road, literally, and both in terms of time. But the applicant is very much in favor and hopes that that project comes to fruition, and we would be willing to some type of condition to grant an easement in the future if that were to happen. Second, as probably would not surprise you, based largely on the application that is not heard tonight around the corner from this property, we got the attention from the Watershed Institute, and we spent some time working with them on some additional features of the project that would help additionally mitigate the stormwater situation on the site. And I want to thank their policy director for working with us, and ultimately there are a few additional items, even though it's not necessarily required for this. We're lowering the amount of impervious, but we were happy to work with them and add these features to the site. So with that, I'd like to actually introduce our planner, and if we could quickly get the benefit of his experience and credentials, we could have him brought in as an expert.
Sure. My name is Brian Leff. I am currently the president of BML Studio. I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, as well as a licensed landscape architect in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. I have provided testimony in front of numerous boards. I don't believe I've had the pleasure of being in front of this board, but I have been in West Windsor, East Windsor, South Brunswick, North Brunswick. Pretty much surrounded you, just haven't had the pleasure of sitting here. I am a graduate from Rutgers University with a Bachelor of Science degree in environmental planning and design with an option in landscape architecture.
I would say you're
Thank you.
qualified as an expert.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to pick up on that last part of it, his capacity as a landscape architect. If you could talk briefly about the types of additions that we were able to, or will be able to incorporate into the project after having spoken with the Watershed Institute.
Sure. As recent as today, as a matter of fact, we had a discussion and learned that they were interested in adding certain features such as porous pavement, rain gardens, and a vegetative strip, because we are within that 300-foot riparian buffer. My understanding, contingent upon the soil conditions, because you do need adequate soils for rain gardens and permeable pavement to percolate. Contingent on that, I believe they were agreeable. Oh, for the vegetative strip, I think when we got to the porous pavement, there was just too many issues with that as far as the areas suggested being right against the building. So even if you had room for the water to go down, it would be sitting right against the foundation of the building. And in the driveway around the circles where you're going to have people turning, the porous pavement tends to fray a little easier than the regular pavement. So that may not be the most practical solution for a residential application, but we do appreciate the suggestion.
So we're looking at slide 2 here. Just generally, for the record, if you could point out a little, the orange area that indicates the site of the new home. Is that?
Yes, as Mr. Kennedy had mentioned, this application involves taking down the existing structure on the house and building a new structure. The orange that's shown on the plan in front of you is where the new house would be located. In connection with the improvements, the overall site, we will be taking slight reduction in the impervious coverage, but what's real important is where it's being reduced. While some of it's being relocated on the property, so it doesn't seem like a whole lot of reduction, there is a substantial amount of impervious surface, including driveway area and other structures, coming out of the buffer areas.
So the green dotted area, that is pavement that is to be removed?
That's correct.
And generally, could you describe where some of the vegetative filter feature would ultimately go, or what happens in the area where the pavement is removed?
Once the pavement is removed, it will all be revegetated, except for a small area where we're showing the improvements, new improvements to be constructed. But in general, it's the northern corner of the site, the back left as you're looking at the property, where the water runs down the slope and down towards the watershed. That would all be vegetated. So that instead of water running over a driveway and going into the stream, it now runs over a lawn area of vegetation. And we're looking at places where we can fit rain gardens. We haven't decided where. Like I said, that was a development as of today, so the design hasn't been laid out. But potentially in that area as well.
So just generally, though, the footprint of these features moves further away, closer to the setback line and further away from the
Correct.
sensitive areas in the rear of the
That
property.
is correct.
Moving now, this is slide 3. You want to explain what we're looking at here?
Slide 3, the left side, or the right side, or no. Yes, left side is the existing conditions. That's basically the survey of the property and shows you what's there now. And you can see on that versus the slide we just had up, how the improvements are much closer to the stream corridor than what we're proposing. The right side is the map location, which is really a telling story for the variance we're seeking this evening. As you can see, we labeled all the lot areas of the surrounding lots, and with the exception of the one lot that's right at the corner, every other lot in the vicinity is undersized for the zone that it's in. Not a single one. In fact, this is one of the larger lots that's there, but every one of them is undersized.
And the lot directly to the left of this lot, is that 4 acres, so that precisely complies but does not have any room for someone to squirrel some property away from them to expand?
Yeah, if I believe the actual acreage is 4.02, so essentially 4 acres on the dot. You're not going to get an extra half acre from any surrounding properties or even a combination of all the properties to make this lot conforming. There's just no practical way to do it.
And is your understanding that the applicant did reach out to all these neighbors to attempt to do that, even though it would not have been legally
Yes.
possible, and
Yes, they did reach out to the neighbors. To my best of my knowledge, they have not received any responses, but they offered to either buy or sell to bring their lot up to conformance or bring one of the other lots up to conformance, and there was really just no interest. All the lots are developed except for that corner lot, which is just environmentally impacted, as I understand.
Mr. Leff, your testimony is these were written overtures to the neighbors?
Yes.
Okay.
with that, I think we've got some sufficient background. If you want to take us through your planning testimony as to the C1 variance that we're requesting?
Sure. And I apologize if I'm a little bit redundant after the introduction. The tract we're talking about is Block 2001, Lot 20, within Princeton, Mercer County, New Jersey. It's also known as 1107 Great Road. It's approximately 350 feet east of the Ridgely Road intersection. The property is currently developed with a single-family residence and associated improvement. The existing house and the pool house are in poor condition, and they really don't meet the current owner's needs. So they're looking to take those down and replace them. Portions of the tract are located within mapped environmentally sensitive areas. There's a 300-foot riparian buffer associated with an unmapped tributary to Mountain Brook, and there's freshwater wetlands and the associated transition or buffer areas that go with the wetlands. The applicant's proposing to demolish the existing structures and redevelop the tract with a new single-family residential dwelling and associated improvements. The existing pool, tennis courts, and a portion of the driveway will be the only features that remain on the site. All proposed development has been reviewed by the NJDEP and determined to comply with the applicable environmental regulations. The disturbance within the riparian buffer complies with an existing permit by Rule Number 10, and the disturbance within the wetland transition area is limited to removal of existing improvements and conversion to vegetated areas. This is environmentally beneficial and determined by the DEP to be a non-regulated activity. The lot's located largely within the RA zoning district, with a portion of the property located within the RB zoning district. So there are two zones at play here. However, in accordance with the Princeton zoning regulations, where a lot's located partially within these two particular zones, the regulations of the zone containing the larger land area shall apply. In this case, it's the RA zone. So the development was designed to comply with the RA zoning regulations. While single-family residential uses are permitted in the RA zone, there is one bulk variance, which is lot area, that we are seeking this evening. And for that variance, 4 acres is required, whereas 3.47 acres is existing and proposed. This is a classic C1 variance, and to quote the land use law, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property, the strict application of any zoning regulation would result in a peculiar and exceptional practical difficulties to, or exceptional and undue hardship upon the developer of such property. This is an existing condition. It's directly related to the shape and size of the tract and the surrounding properties. The applicant has sent letters to the adjacent property owners with an offer to buy or sell the land to rectify the variant condition. To date, no response has been received. The tract is located partially within the RB zoning district, where the minimum lot area is 3 acres. So if the larger portion of this lot was actually in the RB and not the RA zone, this would actually comply with the zone, whereas the other lots that are actually in the RB zone are even less than 3 acres, so they don't even comply with that zone. The only adjacent lot that complies with the minimum lot area for the zone in which it's located is Lot 21, which is 4.02 acres, and that's the corner lot. An additional 0.53 acres would be required to bring the subject tract into conformance with the RA zoning standards. Land acquisition of any land from adjacent properties would exaggerate the variances on those lots, and it still wouldn't provide enough land to bring this lot into conformance. Nearly all the properties within the RA zone in the vicinity of subject tract are undersized. Just to run through real quick, Lot 22 is 3 acres, 23 is 2.77 acres, Lot 24 is 1.49 acres, Lot 25, 1.9 acres, Lot 19 is 2.19 acres, that one is in the RB zone, Lot 28 is 2.13 acres, and Lot 32 is 1.84 acres. So although this is an undersized lot, as you can see, it is one of the larger lots in the area. As an existing condition, the undersized lot will not present any negative impacts to the public good or the zoning ordinance or the zone plan. So in summary, the applicant is proposing to demolish an existing residential structure and certain associated improvements and construct a new structure and new improvements on the lot. While the use is permitted within the RA zoning district, a variance for an undersized lot is being requested. This variance is an existing condition relating to the unique size, shape, physical conditions, and topography of the tract. As a whole, the application will advance several purposes of the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. Those purposes include Purpose A, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use or development of all lands in the state in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. The proposed residential use is consistent with the intended use of the tract, so it's consistent with the master plan and the way the tract was intended to be used. Purpose B, to secure safety from fire, flood, panic, and other natural and man-made disasters within environmental. The project will result in a reduction in impervious surfaces and restoration of vegetated areas. This will inherently reduce the runoff from the property and reduce the risk of downstream flooding. Purpose C is to provide adequate light, air, and open space. Proposed improvements do not encroach into any required setback area. The front yard setback significantly exceeds the minimum required setback distance to maintain the open view corridor along the roadway. And there are no neighbors anywhere nearby, so these improvements really don't affect anyone. Purpose E is to promote the establishment of appropriate population densities and concentrations that will contribute to the well-being of persons, neighborhoods, communities, regions, and preservation of the environment. This tract is zoned for a single-family dwelling, and that's exactly what's being proposed. So the density is very consistent with Princeton's desire and vision. Purpose I is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. The proposed residence will be located more than 300 feet from Great Road, which preserves the scenic corridor along the road. The improvements will be consistent with the development pattern of the immediate surrounding area. As the variance is an existing condition that will not be exaggerated in any way, there are no new impacts associated with it. It's my professional opinion that the relief being sought may be granted without negatively impacting the zone plan or zoning ordinance and will not be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public.
Thank you, Brian. So we do have our environmental consultant here as well. Certainly welcome any questions from the board or staff for either of our witnesses here tonight.
A question, it's a very long driveway, and I'm wondering about the issue of porous or semi-permeable coverage instead of the asphalt that is part of your presentation. That would reduce the impervious area.
Generally, that portion of the project, I believe, is just outside. That's the one place that it's able to be kept, that they're not disturbing. The hope had been to, or the plan is really to relocate the pavement from the sensitive areas in the back to the front. That may have some impact. I don't know. It wasn't one of the things that was necessarily suggested by the watershed, for example. But
No, and since the existing pavement is staying there, that does seem like a bit of a hardship. That's my opinion.
There would be expense.
Yes. For a residential application, if it was a commercial application, possibly. But for a residential application, I think it's a little above and beyond what they're required and what they should be asked to do.
all right. With that, I'd just like to reserve for summation, after public comment. But that's our case in chief there. So thank you.
Question, Derek. Does the impervious coverage require a variance? They're reducing.
Not if they're reducing it currently under the current ordinance.
Even
it's
though
not
it
a
exceeds
variance.
the
Yes, sir.
maximum in the area. Okay. All right. Anybody on the board have any questions for the applicant? Anybody in the audience like to speak on this application? Please come forward, identify yourself, be sworn in, speak.
I'm Lincoln Hollister, and I live at 437 Ridgeview Road.
Mr. Hollister, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here because of the opportunity of the variance request to request that the bike path up Great Road be extended. We all know I've been waiting 30 years for somebody in the town to wake up to the fact that you can't go up the Great Road on the bike path the entire distance. I used to commute to my office along the Great Road, and my wife then pointed out that it was too dangerous to ride there. You can't have two cars and a bike through that cut. And I'm now, too old to bike to work, and in fact, I've retired. But because there's a condition on this lot, I would like to see a condition be that the bike path be extended.
Well, we're lucky that the applicant has willingly endorsed a bike path, at least across his property, which is all we can deal with right now. And that, I would hope, would be part of our memorialization, or when we bring this up for a vote, that might be one of the things we consider.
That is a wonderful start. I have no idea, whether it's easement or bike paths just in the front of their yard, or whether you could start thinking about the bike path. There was the 4-acre lot just between that lot and Ridgeview Road, which a house was able to be built on without having any variance. But can we retroactively get bike path across the front of that piece of property?
That's nothing we can do here, and I don't know if that's doable, but that would be something that you might want to bring up to the council or the planning board, but that's nothing that the zoning board would have any jurisdiction over.
Well, I don't know these things, and I thank you very much for helping me to understand. I'm clearly not going to live to see this bike path going up the Great Road.
Let's not say that.
Probably. But I'm grateful that, that the applicant understands the need for the bike path, and I hope we can go on for there.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. I'm Lisa Seriasol, and I'm here to represent the Bicycle Advisory Committee of the town of Princeton.
Ma'am, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
My committee has drafted a resolution that I'd like to read for you and have it incorporated into this discussion. It is a resolution requesting a condition of approval regarding the variance application for 1107 Great Road. Whereas, the Princeton Planning Board adopted a new circulation element and appendices B1 and B2 as an amendment to the Princeton Community Master Plan on November 2nd, 2017. And whereas the circulation element recommends the development of a continuous network of sidewalks, bikeways, and paths to create linkages between neighborhoods, open space, recreational areas, and schools, as well as providing an alternative to motorized vehicle traffic. And whereas the circulation element concludes with the creation of a circulation plan and maps that include Maps B1 bicycle network, and whereas one of the goals of the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee is to advise the community regarding the implementation of pedestrian and bicycle facilities, And whereas the Princeton Zoning Board of Adjustment in its March 27th, 2019 regular meeting will review an application for the property at 1107 Great Road that requests a variance to permit construction of a new single-family home. And whereas the applicant's property fronts on a section of the Great Road where an extension of the Great Road side path appears on map B1 Bicycle Network, also referred to as Appendix B1 of the circulation element of the Princeton Community Master Plan of November 2nd, 2017. Now, therefore, be it resolved that if a variance were to be granted to the applicant for 1107 Great Road, Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee does hereby resolve that a condition of the variance should be that the applicant make provision for the extension of the bike/pedestrian path on the Great Road along the applicant's frontage. All members of the Princeton Bicycle Advisory Committee present unanimously voted in favor. March 27th, 2019.
Thank you.
Correct. It was earlier this evening.
Well, we're fortunate that we have an applicant who's proactively agreed to do that.
We're grateful.
Okay. Thank them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Mike Pissarro. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed Institute.
Mr. Passard, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to thank Mr. Kennedy and his clients for the dialogue we've had. I've been before this board several times over the last several years. I've been before planning boards, and it has always been our intention and our desire to protect our natural resources. In this instance, we have an unfortunate condition where there was development in buffers, and probably that development occurred way before the buffers ever was recognized by law. So we're in a situation where it is very important for water quality, for public health and safety, to protect those buffers. And we have opposed projects because of the impacts to buffers and to wetlands and streams before. But as I note, this is an instance where you have pre-existing development, which makes it very difficult for us to say, no, you should say no. And the applicant has been very gracious in agreeing to do green infrastructure, and I would urge us to have the green infrastructure, even if the soils are not ideal, because of the slowing ability and the filtering ability of green infrastructure to protect the wetlands buffers and the stream buffers. But I would also note, the applicant is reducing impervious cover in some of the most sensitive areas, which just makes this sort of a different scenario than other scenarios this board has and is considering. So I would hope that the board is cognizant when it makes its deliberations that this is a pre-existing development, that they are taking efforts to better protect the resources and have agreed to do green infrastructure when you sort of make those determinations. So thank you very much for your consideration, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than glad to try to address them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please.
Hello, my name is Christopher Barr. I live on Ridgeview Road, 211 Ridgeview.
And sir, do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this evening will be truthful?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I'm speaking as a member of the Ridgeview Conservancy, and we're a recently formed association of neighbors on the Princeton Ridge, which has adopted the mission of protecting the integrity and the unique ecology of this environmentally sensitive area that we live in. And currently we're particularly focused, as the zoning board knows, on protecting a highly important environmentally sensitive 20-acre contiguous wetland structure, which is known locally as the Ridgeview Wetlands. This wetland structure has been identified as being a critical forest wetlands in the DEP conservation database. It's a major wildlife habitat with a wide range of amphibians, raptors, migratory birds, fox, deer, and New Jersey bobcat has been sighted on this wetlands, as well as red-shouldered hawks, which are endangered in New Jersey. It also supports the headwaters for Mountain Brook, which flows into mountain lakes and from there into the Stony Brook and the Millstone River, which provides drinking water. So from an environmental perspective, this wetland structure, which is adjacent to the property in question, is extremely important. And as the members of the zoning board know, our group is working in consortium with the Friends of Princeton Open Space, the Watershed Institute, as well as Princeton Municipality through the council, and Princeton Environmental Commission and the New Jersey Green Acres Conservation Program to conserve this structure. And we're currently in negotiations with the owner of 394 Ridgeview, and we're hopeful that we can purchase that lot as a central piece in this larger conservation strategy. So having said all that, we certainly welcome the concessions that have been proposed towards supporting environmental infrastructure. We too recognize that development of a site that's already been developed is different from developing an undeveloped site. We would ask the zoning board, if this project is approved, to take a precautionary approach and to articulate stringent conditions for stormwater management, to limit the impervious surface area, to protect the anti-degradation waters, both during the tear-down process as well as during the construction. And we also are strongly in support of the idea of the bike path and the walking path. So thank you very much.
Anybody else like to speak? Okay, we'll close the public portion. I have a question of our engineer. Have you looked at this proposal?
I've got to get sworn in first.
That's right. Mr. West, do you swear from your testimony this evening will be truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Yes, I have looked at the application.
Okay. And do you have any concerns?
Yeah, basically, as was indicated, it does qualify by a permit by rule, which is actually granted by the municipality, not DEP. They are decreasing the impervious coverage. They've agreed. I just want to make sure that the language is clear in the, if this is approved, that we talked about rain gardens, and they kind of said, well, maybe if the soil is good. I think it's something that they should do regardless, or at least as reviewed by the land use engineer. So it's the land use engineer and municipality's decision to do it or not to do it, as opposed to the applicant's decision.
Okay.
And then there's the other thing with the granting an easement for a potential future bike path. Just so everybody's aware, I'm sure you're familiar with the road. I got to say, it's probably highly unlikely that you'll ever get a bike path, just because of the topography, the amount of rock that's there. Yeah. Some of it is almost vertical as you go a little bit further south, and then anything to the north, there's a lot of wetlands. So I'm not saying it'll never happen, but what I would recommend for this is that they grant a 10-foot easement across the front. There is about 20 feet from the curb to the property line. Mm-hmm. The reason for the extra 10 feet, if something is ever done, you have the ability to kind of meander around wetlands, trees, or rock outcrops. So it just gives a little bit more room should we ever get a bike path in there.
Okay. Would that be something you would consider?
Generally, yes. Our request would be that because while we hope, and the family that is going to be living here especially hopes that this gets built, that the condition be that we grant the easement at a time that no?
Because we can't enforce it then. Once you get the building permit, what will the town do? I mean, we're not going to take it away. The house is built.
The condition would run with the land under
Well, I know,
the
but I mean,
Aldrich
that-
case, right?
I know, but
But it-
that means the town's going to have to pursue your client if they say, you know, we thought about it and we'd really rather not do it, or we didn't realize exactly this is where it was going to go. So, in fact, I was talking to Mr. West about that at the beginning of the meeting. I think they're going to have to grant it as a condition of the approval, meaning now. We need the easement now.
We don't see it as a negative to the applicant. If it was a right-of-way dedication, then they lose square footage for
It's just an
future
easement. It's just an
FAR
easement.
impervious, but with an easement, it doesn't impact
I agree.
impervious or FAR.
Okay. While they're talking about that, you are aware, obviously, of the comment of the one neighbor in terms of monitoring the water-related issues in this?
Yes.
Okay, and that's fine?
Yeah, typically, before they build a house, they have to submit the engineering plans to my office for review.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay.
I'm not sure if that's... I don't recall your name, but you also talked about being careful during the deconstruction phase, and that would be part of what you'd be keeping an eye on as
Yes,
well? Or do we
one of the conditions-
Do we need to, do we need to...
Inspects during construction.
So, but do we
You
need to
visit
do
the site
anything in
during
addition to
Yes.
that, or is that, do we need to say anything?
No, I mean, it's in the
Now?
township ordinances, and it's actually shown on the drawing that they have silt fence around the property. They have tree protection around any existing trees that are going to remain. That all has to be done before the demo permit's even issued.
Okay, good.
There will be no tree removal. One of the conditions to make this a permit by rule is that they can't remove any of the existing trees outside of within the C1 zone, which is essentially almost the entire property.
Okay, very good. Okay, thank you. Did you, client, you?
Yes, we're okay with that condition.
Good, okay. All right. Any other comments from anybody before we go into executive session? Do you want to close?
No,
now?
just, I'd like to thank the watershed and the folks on the bike committee who looked at this and took the time to come out and talk about it. I know the applicants are excited that at some point that this may happen. I know, however tangential that may be. And just want to thank the board for your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, executive session. Comments? Well, I think it's a well-done application. It is nice that the amount of impervious coverage is going to decrease. I think the offer of the bike path is very nice, and we welcome that. And I'm supportive of the application.
Yeah, I concur with that.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay.
And the motion subject to the conditions that Mr. West
Subject to the
outlined.
condition on the bike
Yes.
path,
Subject to-
on the engineering concerns, and I guess the impervious coverage is not necessary.
Correct, and I guess, Jack, you described rain garden and vegetative strip?
Yeah, basically, I work with the applicant to come up with some type of rain garden, and there's actually, looking at the plan,
And
I
that
think
would
there's a
be
good
at
spot
your
for it.
determination as
Yes.
to the extent of it. Okay.
Okay.
Call the vote. Call the vote.
You're done with the conditions? Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Piron Lambrose?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, we still have one more application before us this evening. 4 Hawthorne Avenue, block 2302, lot 16, in the R3 zone.
Amen.
Excuse me, can you carry on the conversation outside, please?
I'll note that the noticing is in order, and the board has jurisdiction to hear the application.
Very good. Mr. Berger?
Yes, sir. Ann Kennedy is the owner of 4 Hawthorne Avenue and is seeking a C2 variance to permit the construction of a new entry room and a kitchen expansion within the required rear yard setback. She seeks to add a 123-square-foot addition, which will be put on the back of the house and expand the addition kitchen. The property's in the R3 zone, and subject to the use and bulk regulations in accordance with 17A 241 and 245. The subject property is non-complying with regard to the rear yard setback. The requirement is 35 feet. The existing is 20.1 feet. The proposed 123-square-foot one-story addition to the eastern side of the existing home will violate that rear yard setback. The required setback is 35 feet, and the proposed setback of the addition is 29.3 feet, and they've requested C2 consideration. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address them. It's a pretty de minimis addition.
Questions? Okay, please proceed. You have to speak into the microphone or make sure it's...
And Ms. Kennedy, we need to swear you in. Do you swear affirm your testimony this evening will be truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
So my name is Ann Kennedy. I'm the owner of 4 Hawthorne Avenue in Princeton. I've lived there for 11 years. The home was built in 1927. It's a brick colonial with clapboard. We have spent the last year thinking about how to modify the kitchen for this home. We've gone through a number of different architectural plans to try to think through the best design to both preserve the colonial nature of the home, but also to minimize any disruption either to the neighborhood or to the home itself. Having gone through those different plans to actually make changes internal to the home relative to the kitchen means that it would compromise the colonial structure of the home, and we really want to preserve that. And we believe that this design does exactly that. So when you look at the current home, the existing structure is non-compliant. As the northerly wall of the structure is 20.1 inches off the property line, and we're proposing to add approximately 123 square feet in an area east of the existing structure. While the proposed improvements do not bring the structure any closer to the north property line, it's 5 feet 7 inches, and approximately 34 square feet of the addition fall within the rear yard setback, and that's what's requiring the C2 variance. We have sort of a picture of the construction that I can show. You guys also have the plans, but in short, this is the existing, if you want to just point for me, Keith. This is the existing two-story building here in the dark. What we're proposing to do is to add 127 square feet, or about 123 square feet, I'm sorry, exactly off here. So the kitchen currently is right here. We're just proposing to bump it out, consistent with this existing structure. Because we've already got an existing non-conforming lot, what it's basically doing is just bringing it slightly over that rear setback.
Yeah, well, our drawings are consistent with that. Do we want to mark that as an exhibit?
Do I need to repeat it? Okay.
And that's the main aspect of what we're asking today. I think that there...
Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
What's the name of that drawing that we just marked?
So the drawing is labeled A-00, and it's the cover sheet, and I labeled it number 1.
Okay. I think that there are 5 primary benefits to moving forward with this construction. The first one is that it maintains the historic organization, both of the house on the exterior, but also the interior. It's requiring sort of minimal internal work, and it's confining that work largely to the kitchen. It also locates a back entry where it best serves both guests and family. It avoids adding impervious cover, and is actually reducing that by 78 feet. And it's minimizing visual impact from the street. So those are the primary reasons. When you look at the house, it was this 2-story home built in stages. As I said earlier, it's originally a traditional colonial. The renovation will provide covered access. It will include a mudroom, which will allow for putting on shoes, taking off wet clothing, hanging up coats, a functional modern kitchen. Today, the kitchen has like 4 countertops that are about 15 inches in space, so it is a very tiny kitchen in this home. Improved access to the existing laundry room, additional light in the family room, and it will also provide sort of access to the rear terrace, which is not completely accessible easily today, as well as built-ins for the family room. If you look at the house from the front view on Hawthorne Avenue, as well as the corner view on Moore, there will be no changes to the facade in any form. There's no change to the height. In terms of the materials, we're keeping with the same palette. We're going to be keeping with the brick as well as clapboard, which is consistent with the remainder of the house. And the windows and doors are going to be aluminum and glass, and the canopy and brackets are painted wood. And those are the planned remarks that we have. I don't know if there are questions or comments.
I don't have any questions. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm just curious, because if you could build it out a little further without interfering your side setback, does this really meet your needs?
You know, I think it does. It's going to be a nice-sized kitchen, and I really want to keep in keeping with the home itself. I don't want a room that's disproportionate with the remainder of the colonial home. And it's one thing that's been really important to me is to try to preserve the historical aspect of this home, and I think that this kitchen does it. You know, I didn't want sort of a McMansion kitchen there.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
No, I just, in terms of the summary, you know, we're just requesting the variance for the 123 square feet and to get permission for the C2.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to say something? Okay. All right, hearing none, let's go into executive session. Comments?
I support it. I support it.
Okay.
Me too.
Agree.
All right. Motion?
Approve.
Okay, second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Claudia?
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Colson?
Yes.
Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
Mr. Shriver?
Yes.
Ms. Chen?
Yes.
Ms. Perron-Lambrose?
Yes.
Mr. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is the Bayard Lane one coming up next time?
We are adjourned.
Steve? Is the Bayard Lane, the Peacock Inn, is that going to be considered?
Those are not conditions. Those were applied for a long time, but they are not